The transport bay doors screamed open to vacuum, and Sergeant Marcus Webb watched 3 of his squad vanish into the black. No ceremony. No warning, just gone. The Krathek overseer chittered something that might have been laughter, while electromagnetic clamps released their hold on the remaining humans. 27 miners left from the original 50. Webb's hands were steady as he gripped the mining laser, but his jaw ached from clenching. Around him, the survivors stumbled toward their cells, heads down, shoulders hunched. Playing the part. Animals learn through loss, the overseer announced in fractured human speech, mandibles clicking. 3 bodies teach 20 lessons. Webb filed the words away with all the others. 6 months of servitude. 6 months of watching his people treated like livestock, while the Kranthic Dominion harvested minerals from the belt colonies. The aliens stood 8 feet tall on chitinous legs, their exoskeletons gleaming under harsh industrial lights. They moved with the confidence of apex predators who'd never encountered resistance worth remembering. That confidence would kill them. In the sleeping quarters, Webb waited until the surveillance drones completed their patrol cycle. 43 seconds. Enough time for coded hand signals. Corporal Chen caught his eye from across the crowded cell. 2 fingers. 3rd ventilation shaft. Midnight rotation? She nodded once and turned away. No acknowledgement. No risk. The Krothic believed humans broken. They'd learned this approach across a dozen conquered species: apply sufficient pressure, remove leadership, demonstrate overwhelming force, and resistance crumbled. It worked on the Velnari. It worked on the Droon. It worked on every species that valued individual survival over collective action. They'd never encountered Marines. Webb had been a mining consultant before the invasion, assigned to survey asteroid habitats for the Colonial Development Corps. His military records stayed buried in classified files the Krothic never bothered accessing. Why would they... Humans were primitives. Barely spacefaring. Their ships were crude, their weapons unsophisticated, their tactics non-existent. The Dominion conquered Earth's outer colonies in 6 days, but they'd made one critical mistake. They'd left the survivors alive for labor. At midnight, Webb crawled through ventilation shafts designed for automated maintenance, not human bodies. The metal edges cut into his shoulders. He ignored the pain, focusing on memorized station schematics he'd pieced together from stolen maintenance tablets. Chen waited at the junction, along with Park, Okonkwo, and Reeves. 5 people, enough to start. The schedule? Webb whispered. Transport leaves for the Dominion core worlds in 72 hours, Chen reported. They're shipping processed minerals and taking 50 more humans as labor stock. Weapons inventory? Locked-in Armory Section 12. Biometric seals. Krothic physiology only. Webb smiled without humor. They assume we can't bypass that. Watch and learn. They move through the station's infrastructure like ghosts, avoiding patrols by seconds, utilizing blind spots Webb had identified during weeks of observation. The Krothic relied on technology and intimidation. They didn't post guards in redundant areas. Why waste resources on defeated animals? The Armory's biometric scanner required a specific protein sequence found only in Krathek blood. Webb produced a small container he'd filled during the previous week, collecting samples from discarded medical waste. The aliens were arrogant about disposal. They never imagined humans would root through their garbage. The scanner flickered green. The door hissed open. Inside, racks of plasma rifles designed for forearm physiology lined the walls, useless for human hands. But Webb wasn't interested in rifles. He moved to the equipment lockers, finding what he'd hoped for: demolition charges. The Krothic used them for mining operations, trusting their own encryption to prevent theft. They'd never considered that Marines learned explosive handling before they learned to shave. We can't fight them directly, Reeves said, staring at the weapons. They'll slaughter us. We're not fighting them, Webb replied, carefully examining a charge's activation mechanism. We're teaching them a lesson. What lesson? That animals bite when cornered. He worked quickly, disabling safety protocols the Krothic thought impenetrable. The charges weren't sophisticated by human military standards, but they didn't need to be. Station keeping in an asteroid field required precise atmospheric pressure. Compromise the hull integrity in the right locations, and the automatic emergency systems would do the rest. Chen watched the corridor while Webb programmed timing sequences. 72 hours until transport departure. They needed 48 hours to prepare. That left 24 hours for evacuation. The escape pods won't hold everyone, Okonkwo pointed out. They will if we use the Krothic pods in the officer section, Webb said. Better supplied. They won't expect us to know the access codes. Do we know the access codes? We will. The station commander reviews security protocols every third day. Tomorrow's the third day. He follows the same route. Same timing. Same arrogance. Park's eyes widened. You're going to... Yes. That's torture. Webb looked at her directly. They spaced 3 of our people today for missing quota during a cave-in they caused. They've beaten 20 others unconscious for asking questions. They parade us in front of visiting officials as examples of conquered primitives. You want to debate ethics, or you want to survive? Silence filled the armory. Then Chen spoke quietly. What do you need us to do? Webb outlined the plan in precise economic language. No dramatics, no speeches. Just operational details delivered with the same calm he'd used planning training exercises a lifetime ago. The others listened, asked tactical questions, and accepted their assignments. They were mining consultants and engineers and terraforming specialists, but 6 months of degradation had burned away everything except the core of who they were. Humans didn't break the same way other species did. Pushed far enough, they didn't surrender. They transformed. As they prepared to return to the cells, Reeves grabbed Webb's arm. After this happens, they'll hunt us. The whole Dominion. We'll be fugitives. Better than livestock, Webb replied. They'll call us animals. They already do. Difference is, we're about to show them which animals survive. The next 48 hours blurred into coordinated chaos masked as routine submission. Webb's team moved through their assigned tasks while positioning explosives in critical junctions. They hacked supply manifests, redirected maintenance schedules, and slowly, methodically, created a cascade failure scenario that would cripple the station without killing everyone aboard. The Kronthek noticed nothing. Why would they? Animals didn't plan. Animals didn't deceive. Animals simply existed until they served their purpose or died. On the final night, Webb stood in the mining bay one last time, watching the asteroid field rotate beyond the reinforced windows. Somewhere out there, the Dominion fleet controlled hundreds of systems. Earth was quarantined, its population reduced to scattered survivors in labor camps. Humanity's first contact with alien civilization had ended in complete defeat. But defeat wasn't death, and humans had always been exceptional at learning from failure. The station commander never saw Chen coming. The access codes took 11 minutes to extract. Webb felt nothing during the process except grim efficiency. Morality was a luxury afforded to species not fighting for survival. At 040 station time, 300 humans moved silently toward the escape pod bay. No alarms. No guards. Just careful timing and exploited arrogance. Webb armed the charges with a manual detonator, giving them 8 minutes before structural collapse. The Krathek discovered the escape too late. They rushed toward the bay in chittering confusion, raising weapons, demanding surrender. Webb stood at the pod entrance, watching them approach. For the first time in 6 months, he allowed himself to smile. "Tell your queen," he said clearly, "that humanity sends its regards." He triggered the detonator and sealed the door. The explosions rippled through the station in cascading waves, each charge precisely placed to maximize damage while allowing evacuation time. Atmosphere vented from critical sections. The Krathek scrambled for their own escape routes, abandoning station protocol in panic. Through the pod window, Webb watched the mining facility tear itself apart. Metal screaming, lights dying, the whole structure collapsing into the asteroid field it had been built to exploit. 300 humans jettisoned into space inside stolen pods, their systems already plotting courses toward the outer colonies. The Crate would pursue. They'd hunt every survivor. They'd demand retribution for the audacity of livestock that dared resist. But they'd also learn something new. Humanity wasn't like the other conquered species. Humans didn't break predictably. They adapted. They waited. They struck when underestimated. And that information, Webb knew, would spread through the Dominion faster than any military intelligence. Word of the station's destruction would reach the homeworlds. It would reach the fleet commanders. It would reach the ears of those who made decisions about how to treat conquered primitives. Most importantly, it would reach the Queen herself. Chen floated beside him in zero gravity, her face illuminated by the pod's emergency lighting. What happens now? Webb watched the debris field expand, each piece of wreckage a testament to human resilience. Now we regroup, gather survivors, build something the Dominion won't expect. They'll come for us. Let them come. We're not the same species they invaded 6 months ago. We're not defeated colonists anymore. We're survivors who know their weaknesses. Through the viewport, distant stars glittered against the infinite black. Somewhere among them, Earth waited under occupation. Humanity's cradle, conquered but not extinguished. Webb had spent 6 months learning Krathic methods, studying their technology, understanding their psychology. That education would serve purposes the Dominion couldn't imagine. The pod's navigation system chirped, indicating successful trajectory lock. They were heading toward the belt's outer reaches, where destroyed mining platforms and forgotten settlements offered hiding places. Other pods reported similar courses. The scattered fleet of human survivors, united by shared trauma and newfound purpose. Reeves reviewed supply inventories on a stolen tablet. We have enough rations for 6 weeks, maybe 8 if we stretch them. We'll scavenge, Webb said. The Krathic leave waste behind, like breadcrumbs. They don't expect anyone to use their discarded resources. And then? Then? We become the resistance they never anticipated. We hit supply lines, disrupt operations,
make ourselves too expensive to contain.
The Dominion conquered us because we were unprepared and divided. They'll find us much harder to suppress now that we're unified by survival. Park laughed bitterly. 5 years ago, I was designing atmospheric processors for terraforming projects. Now I'm a guerrilla fighter. 5 years ago, we thought we were alone in the universe, Chen countered. We adjusted. The pods maintained radio silence, communicating only through tight beam-encrypted bursts Webb had programmed from stolen Krathic protocols. 300 survivors from one station. Intelligence suggested similar camps existed throughout the occupied territories. If even 10% managed similar escapes, humanity would have a fighting force numbering in the thousands. Not enough to liberate Earth. Not enough to challenge the Dominion fleet directly, but enough to be a persistent problem. Enough to make occupation costly. Enough to force the Queen to divert resources to suppressing resistance instead of expanding conquest. Enough to matter. Hours passed in silence as the pods crossed into darker regions where sensor coverage thinned. Webb used the time to compose a message, carefully encoded, designed to reach other human survivors through captured communication networks. His words were precise and measured, conveying tactical information without revealing specific locations. The transmission ended with a simple declaration. They called us animals. Show them animals have teeth. He broadcast the message in short bursts across multiple frequencies, then destroyed the transmitter to prevent tracking. The words would spread or they wouldn't. Other survivors would respond or they'd remain hidden. Webb had done what he could with available resources. The rest depended on human nature. That nature had created art and philosophy and science. It had driven exploration and innovation and countless achievements that defined civilization, but it also contained something older, something the Krathic hadn't encountered in their conquests, an unwillingness to accept subjugation. A capacity for violence when threatened, a tendency to become more dangerous when cornered rather than less. The Dominion studied humanity's culture and technology before invading. They reviewed history files, analyzed military capabilities, assessed governmental structures, but they'd made their conclusions based on surface observations. They saw a species barely pass chemical rockets. They saw political divisions and economic disparities. They saw weakness. They'd missed the essential truth buried in every human conflict, every revolution, every uprising throughout history. Humans didn't surrender gracefully. They endured. They adapted. They survived. And when pushed beyond tolerance, they fought with creativity and determination that transformed defeat into prolonged resistance. Webb's communicator buzzed softly. Another pod confirming rendezvous coordinates. Then another. Within minutes, all 300 survivors had acknowledged the rally point. A broken asteroid in the belt's shadow zone, radioactive enough to mask their signatures, stable enough to support temporary habitation. It wasn't much. A few weeks of safety at most before they'd need to move again. But it was more than they'd had 12 hours ago when they were still livestock awaiting transport to the Dominion core worlds. The pod shuddered slightly as it adjusted trajectory automated systems compensating for gravitational variations. Webb checked their course one final time, then allowed himself to rest. His body ached from crawling through ventilation shafts and carrying explosives and fighting exhaustion for 48 consecutive hours. But his mind remained sharp, already planning the next steps. They'd need weapons, real weapons, designed for human physiology. The Krathic arsenal was useless, but their manufacturing facilities could be repurposed. They'd need intelligence on fleet movements, occupation force deployments, supply chain vulnerabilities. They'd need allies among the other conquered species if such alliances were possible. Most importantly, they'd need to send a message that reached beyond tactical victories. They needed the Dominion to understand that humanity would never accept subjugation, that every occupied colony would breed resistance. that the cost of controlling human populations would exceed the value of resources extracted. They needed to become ungovernable. The asteroid appeared on sensors exactly where the coordinates indicated. Other pods were already arriving, their occupants beginning the work of establishing basic shelter. Webb watched humans who'd been broken and brutalized 6 months ago transform into organized teams. No orders required. They'd survived together, escaped together, and now they'd build something new together. Chen floated beside him as their pod prepared to dock. "Do you think they're watching us, the Kranthek fleet? They're analyzing our escape, identifying how we bypass security, calculating our probable destinations. Right now, some intelligence officer is compiling a report on the incident. Will they come after us immediately? No. We're not important enough yet. The Dominion controls hundreds of systems. 300 escaped humans are a minor administrative problem. They'll note the security failures, update protocols, and move on. Then why did we do this?" Webb smiled, and this time the expression held genuine warmth. "Because that report will reach the Queen's advisors, and when she asks how primitive animals destroyed an entire mining station, they won't have a satisfying answer. That question will stay with her. It'll influence how she approaches humanity going forward. You think one destroyed station will change Dominion policy? I think consistent resistance across multiple colonies will force them to reconsider whether conquering humanity is worth the cost. We're not trying to win battles, we're trying to make occupation unsustainable." The pod docked with mechanical precision. Webb unsealed the hatch and pulled himself through into the asteroid's hollowed interior. Someone had already established artificial gravity using stolen Craddock generators. People moved with purpose, setting up communications equipment, organizing supplies, establishing defensive positions. They looked nothing like defeated refugees. They looked like survivors preparing for war. Okonkwo approached, datapad in hand. "We've got incoming transmissions from 4 other locations. Encrypted, using the protocols you distributed. They're saying similar uprisings occurred at mining stations in the Kepler sector and the Centauri belt." Webb felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Hope, maybe. Or a recognition that humanity's response to conquest was becoming coordinated. How many survivors? Combined? Nearly 2,000. 2,000 humans, scattered across occupied space, unified by shared trauma and determination to resist. Not an army, not yet, but a foundation, something to build upon. "Established secure communication networks," Webb ordered. "Share tactical intelligence. Coordinate supply raids. We need to function as a distributed resistance, not isolated cells. And if the Krathiks start executing prisoners in retaliation?" The question hung in the recycled air. Webb had considered this inevitability during the planning stages. The Dominion would respond to resistance with increased brutality. More humans would die. The cost of defiance would be measured in thousands of lives. But the cost of submission was extinction of everything that made humanity worth preserving. "We document every atrocity," Webb said quietly. "We broadcast it to every conquered species in Dominion space. We show them that resistance is possible. If we die fighting, we die free. If we survive, we reclaim what was taken. Either way, we choose our fate instead of accepting theirs." The command center, such as it was, slowly took shape in the asteroid's central chamber. Stolen equipment lined makeshift walls. Humans who'd been terraforming engineers and mining consultants studied tactical displays with the focused intensity of military planners. They were learning, adapting, becoming what survival required. Park approached Webb with a concerned expression. "The children. We have 47 miners among the survivors. We need to protect them. Assign them to the inner chambers, furthest from any potential breach points."
And Park? Teach them.
"Everything we know about Krothek technology, tactics, psychology, they're going to inherit this fight. They're children. They're the generation that will determine whether humanity has a future. Childhood is a luxury we can't afford anymore." The words tasted like ash, but Webb forced them out anyway. Truth mattered more than comfort. The Dominion had stolen humanity's innocence, along with its freedom. Pretending otherwise served no purpose. Days blurred into weeks as the resistance established operational patterns. Small teams launched raids against supply convoys, stealing weapons and technology. Others hacked Dominion communications, gathering intelligence. A few managed to infiltrate occupied colonies, spreading word that escape was possible, resistance was growing, humanity hadn't surrendered. The Krathek responded predictably. Increased security. Public executions. propaganda broadcasts declaring human resistance futile. But they also diverted ships from expansion efforts to patrol occupied territories. They reinforced station defenses. They began treating humans as potential threats rather than passive livestock. Webb monitored these changes through intercepted communications, watching the Dominion's perception of humanity evolve. The Queen's advisors now use different terminology in their reports. Insurgents instead of labor stock, security threats instead of primitives, persistent resistance instead of isolated incidents. Language revealed truth. The Dominion was beginning to understand that humanity wouldn't conform to their conquest model. 6 months after the station escape, Webb received a communication that changed everything. The message originated from deep within Dominion space, transmitted through networks so secure that intercepting it required luck as much as skill. The content was brief, clinical, and absolutely remarkable. It was a formal request for diplomatic contact, from the Queen herself. The others gathered around the display, reading the message in stunned silence. Chen spoke first. "It's a trap, obviously." "Maybe," Webb acknowledged, "but it's also an admission. The Queen doesn't negotiate with animals. She's recognizing us as entities worth communicating with. She wants us to surrender. She wants to understand why we won't." Reeves shook his head. "We can't trust them. They murdered billions during the invasion. Trust has nothing to do with it. This is about leverage. The Queen is offering dialogue because suppressing resistance is costing resources she'd rather spend elsewhere. We've made occupation expensive enough that negotiation seems preferable to continued conflict. So we accept?" Webb studied the message again, analyzing phrasing and structure for hidden meanings. The Queen offered safe passage for a delegation, guaranteed security, neutral territory for discussions. All standard diplomatic protocols applied to a species the Dominion had previously treated as conquered property. It was remarkable. It was probably a trap. It was also an opportunity that wouldn't repeat. "We accept," Webb decided, "but not to surrender. We go to teach the Queen the same lesson we taught her miners. That humanity won't be livestock. That resistance will continue until occupation ends or we're extinct. Either way, we choose our fate." The preparations took 3 weeks. Webb selected a delegation of 5, choosing people who'd survived the worst of Krothic brutality and emerged with their determination intact. They carried no weapons, knowing the Queen's security would detect anything lethal. Their only protection was the certainty that their deaths would inspire rather than suppress the resistance. The journey to neutral territory passed in tense silence. The Dominion vessel that collected them was luxurious compared to the mining station, but Webb remained alert for signs of deception. The Kraythek crew treated them with formal courtesy that felt surreal after months of degradation. They were no longer animals in their captors' eyes. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. The meeting chamber was vast, designed to accommodate the Queen's full form. She stood 12 feet tall, her exoskeleton decorated with precious metals that signified authority older than human civilization. Forearms gestured with precise elegance. Compound eyes studied the delegation with intelligence that had conquered 100 worlds. Webb met her gaze without flinching. Two species, separated by biology and history, united only by conflict neither had anticipated. "You persist where others submit," the Queen said, her human speech flawless. "Explain why." "Because you called us animals, and animals, when cornered, do only one thing." He leaned forward slightly, his voice steady and absolutely certain. "They survive." The Queen tilted her head, mandibles clicking softly in what might have been respect or acknowledgement, or something humanity had no reference for understanding. "Your resistance cannot succeed. My fleets control your homeworld. Your colonies are occupied. Your military infrastructure is destroyed. Continued defiance achieves only prolonged suffering." "Then why am I here?" Webb asked. "If we're defeated, why negotiate?" Around them, Dominion advisors shifted uncomfortably. The Queen's compound eyes never left Webb's face. "Because," she said finally, "you are teaching me that conquest has nuances I had not previously encountered. Other species accept their place in the Dominion. They adapt to occupation. They find prosperity within our structure. Humanity refuses these patterns." "We refuse subjugation," Webb corrected. "There's a difference. Explain. Your Dominion offers stability in exchange for freedom. Other species accept that trade because stability seems valuable. Humans value freedom more. We'd rather die resisting than live as property. That's not defiance. It's nature." Proved again, faster this time. Nature can be modified through sufficient pressure. "You've been trying that for 18 months. How's it working?" The advisors tensed, clearly expecting punishment for such insolence. Instead, the Queen made a sound that might have been laughter, poorly. Your resistance spreads like disease. Destroyed infrastructure requires constant replacement. Labor efficiency remains catastrophically low. And now, other conquered species watch humanity's example with what my analysts describe as concerning interest. The Queen wasn't threatening. She was explaining a problem she couldn't solve through conventional means. Humanity had become an equation that didn't balance according to Dominion mathematics. So what do you propose? He asked. Conditional autonomy? Your species maintains internal governance while accepting Dominion oversight, limited military capacity, economic integration, diplomatic representation, in exchange for cessation of violent resistance. We keep our freedom but accept your authority? That's not autonomy. That's surrender with better terminology. It's survival, the Queen countered. Your resistance cannot liberate Earth. My fleets will not withdraw. We have reached an impasse where continued conflict benefits neither species. I offer compromise. Webb glanced at his delegation. Chen's expression was unreadable. Park looked skeptical. Okonkwo's hands were clenched but steady. Reeves watched the Queen with the intensity of someone calculating attack vectors. They were thinking the same thing Webb was. The Queen's offer acknowledged humanity as a force requiring negotiation rather than simple suppression. That recognition alone represented a victory the Resistance hadn't dared imagine 18 months ago. But accepting compromise meant abandoning everyone still suffering under occupation. It meant trusting a species that had murdered billions. It meant gambling humanity's future on alien promises. I need to consult with other resistance leaders, Webb said carefully. You have 72 hours. After that, I resume standard pacification protocols with increased severity. Your choice is simple. Accept compromise or face extinction. The Queen dismissed them with a gesture. Guards escorted the delegation back to their vessel in the same formal courtesy that felt wrong after everything humanity had endured. Webb remained silent until they were alone, the ship accelerating toward the asteroid base. Then Reeves exploded. We can't seriously be considering this. She's offering slavery with better public relations. Earth still exists under her proposal. Humans govern themselves within limits. That's better than our current reality. It's submission. Everything we fought for, abandoned. Everything we fought for, Chen said quietly, was buying time until we could negotiate from strength. We have that now. The Queen came to us. That changes the calculation. Webb let them argue, processing possibilities himself. The Queen's offer was simultaneously generous and terrible. Humanity would survive but diminished, free but constrained, alive, but never fully independent. Yet the alternative was extinction or perpetual guerrilla warfare against insurmountable odds. The resistance could continue for decades, but they couldn't liberate Earth. They couldn't defeat the Dominion fleet. They could only make occupation expensive while their own people suffered the consequences. We put it to a vote, Webb decided. Every resistance cell, every survivor. Complete transparency, whatever humanity chooses, we commit to that path absolutely. The vote took 5 days to compile. Responses arrived from scattered resistance cells across occupied space, each group adding their voice to humanity's collective decision. The numbers were closer than Webb anticipated. 43% favored continuing resistance regardless of cost. 41% supported accepting the Queen's compromise. 16% abstained, unable to choose between survival and freedom. In the end, a coalition of moderates and pragmatists tipped the balance. Humanity would accept conditional autonomy, but with specific demands. Complete amnesty for resistance fighters, immediate cessation of executions and collective punishment, independent verification of governance agreements, and, most importantly, gradual withdrawal of Dominion military presence from Earth over a 10-year timeline. Webb transmitted the counteroffer knowing it might trigger the extinction the Queen had promised. Demanding concessions from a position of weakness violated every diplomatic principle. But humanity had survived this long by refusing to behave as expected. Why stop now? The Queen's response arrived within hours. She accepted every demand. The transition from resistance to conditional peace was complicated and painful. Humans who'd lost everything to Dominion conquest struggled to coexist with former oppressors. Kraythek commanders who'd treated humans as livestock now had to recognize them as diplomatic equals. The friction generated incidents, violence, setbacks that threatened the fragile agreement, but slowly, incrementally, both species adapted. The Queen assigned advisors genuinely interested in understanding human psychology rather than suppressing it. Human representatives learned Dominion protocols and began advocating within alien power structures. The first year was terrible, the second was merely difficult. By the third, something resembling stable coexistence emerged. Webb watched Earth's skies gradually empty of Dominion warships, their departure marking promises kept. He stood in the rebuilt capital, surrounded by humans rebuilding civilization on their own terms, and allowed himself to believe that resistance had achieved something worth the cost. Chen found him there, looking older but no less determined than the day they'd escaped the mining station. The Queen's requesting another meeting. Personal. Just you. Webb traveled to the Dominion homeworld, walking corridors where no human had been permitted before. The Queen received him in a private chamber, without advisors or guards, just two beings who'd shaped each other's species through conflict and compromise. "I wanted you to understand something," the Queen said. "When I first learned of your resistance, I was angry. Confused. No conquered species had behaved this way. My advisors recommended total extermination as the only viable response." "What changed your mind?" "A human child, one of the prisoners we kept for labor assessment. She was 7 years old. A guard struck her for speaking out of turn. Do you know what she did? Sensing the answer mattered, she bit him, drew blood through his exoskeleton. When we restrained her, she looked at me with absolutely no fear and said, 'You can't make me stop being human.' That moment, I understood. Your species doesn't resist because of tactics or ideology. You resist because submission is literally incompatible with your nature. So you offered compromise. For both our species, because if I'd pursued extinction, your resistance would have inspired other conquered populations. The Dominion would have collapsed, fighting rebellions across 100 worlds. That child taught me that some animals, when cornered, destroy everything rather than surrender. Better to step back than force that confrontation." Webb felt something shift in his perception of the Queen. She wasn't evil. She wasn't cruel. She was simply operating from assumptions that humanity had shattered through sheer stubborn refusal to behave as expected. "The child?" he asked. "What happened to her?" "She's attending the Dominion's finest academy, studying xenobiology. She says she wants to understand her former captors better than they understood her." The Queen's mandibles clicked in what Webb now recognized as amusement. "She's going to be remarkable. That's what you never understood about humanity. We're not remarkable because we're strong or smart or technologically advanced. We're remarkable because we absolutely refuse to accept that any challenge is insurmountable. You called us animals. We proved that animals, when cornered, rewrite the rules." The Queen was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke with what might have been respect. "Your species will either save the Dominion or destroy it. I'm not certain which. But I'm grateful we chose compromise over finding out through warfare." He shared it with the resistance leaders who'd become humanity's new government. He shared it with the families still healing from occupation's trauma. He shared it with the children who'd inherited a universe more complex than anyone had imagined. And he shared it with that 7-year-old girl, now 10, who'd bitten a Krothic guard and changed the course of interstellar history. She listened carefully, her expression serious beyond her years. When he finished, she asked one question. Did we win? Webb considered his answer. Earth was free, but within Dominion boundaries. Humanity was autonomous, but not independent. They'd survived, but at costs that would echo through generations. "We're alive," he said finally. "We're free to be human. We chose our fate instead of accepting theirs. Maybe that's the only victory that matters." The girl smiled, and Webb saw in her expression the same stubborn determination that had carried humanity through its darkest hours. Whatever challenges the future held, whatever conflicts emerged between species, still learning to coexist, humanity would face them as they'd faced occupation. By refusing to surrender? By adapting and persisting. By being absolutely, defiantly, remarkably human. They'd been called animals. They'd proven that animals, properly motivated, could change the universe, and the Queen had taken note.